Okay. Hi to my 27 subscribers and anybody else who watches this video. Okay. I'm gonna try to finish chapter 1 of American Marxism. Okay. The campaign to legitimize and marginalize the Democratic Party's political opposition is further evidenced by Biden's reckless racial rhetoric in accusing Republicans in Georgia of instituting Jim Crow laws to prevent black citizens from voting, a contemptible lie intended to upset minorities and turn them against the Republican Party. Although weaponizing race is not new to the Democratic Party, given its historic pedigree from supporting slavery to segregation and Biden's vocal and active opposition to integration early in his Senate career, it is shocking to witness its grotesque rebirth as a political tool. And during the violent riots last summer and this spring, which involved looting, arson, and even murder in multiple cities over the course of several months, and where Antifa and BLM had prominent organizational roles, the Democratic Party's leadership mostly regurgitated the rhetoric and claims of the anarchists, Marxist groups and rioters, including the broad condemnation of law enforcement as systemically racist, and were not only loath to denounce the violence, but incredibly declared the rioters as mostly peaceful, and their demand to defund the police later changed to slash their budgets as legitimate. In fact, a BML co-founder declared in the summer of 2020 that one of their goals is to Trump out now. Democratic-controlled cities named streets after the group, and numerous Biden campaign staffers donated to a fund that paid the bail for the release of those who were arrested and jailed. Obviously, the Democratic Party and Biden campaign perceived an overlap or synergy of political interests and objectives with the rioters. The Democratic Party seeks to empower itself by breaching constitutional firewalls, skirting, if not eradicating, rules, traditions, and customs, adopting Marx's language of class warfare, and aligning with certain avowedly Marxist groups and ideological causes, among other things. Moreover, it is using the instrumentalities of the group for its political empowerment and purposes. The truth is that the interests of the Democratic Party come before those of the country. An alliance to the party is more important than fidelity to the country. It holds these characteristics in common with other autocratic and communist parties throughout the world. Marxism is especially alluring to and actively supported by individuals who find Marxism oppressed class warfare construct appealing for several reasons. First, the fact is people want to belong to groups, including ethnic, racial, religious, and economic groups. People find identity, commonality, purpose, and even self-worth with such attachments. Indeed, I believe this to be the most potent of Marx's paradigms, because he exploits this instinctively human and psychologically emotional appeal to create passionate and even fanatical adherents, and revolutionaries. This is another characteristic of American Marxism and the Democratic Party. This brings me to my second point. Within this class warfare construct, Marxism's adherents and would-be followers are encouraged to view themselves and the groups with which they identify as the oppressed, that is, the victims, and their oppressors are found in the existing society, culture, and economic system from which the oppressed must liberate themselves and their fellow travelers, meaning those victims who identify with or are also members of the same group. This is a primary reason why Marxism stresses classism over individualism. The individual is dehumanized and is nothing unless he identifies with a group, the oppressed and victimized group. And the individuals who make up opposing or non-conforming groups are collectively dehumanized, condemned, and loathed as the enemy. Again, this is a trait of American Marxism and the Democratic Party. Of course, this formulation is especially seductive to the malcontented, disenchanted, disaffected, and dissatisfied. For them, individual liberty and capitalism expose their own shortcomings and failings, and their difficulty and perhaps inability to function in an open society. Marxism provides a theoretical and institutional framework through which they can project their own limitations and weakness onto the system and their oppressors, rather than take responsibility for their own real or perceived plight. Again, as I wrote in Ameritopia, these individuals are lured by the false hopes and promises of the utopian transformation and the criticisms of the existing society, to which their connection is tentative or non-existent. Improving the malcontents' lot becomes linked to the utopian cause. Many in this population are susceptible to manipulation, especially by demagogues and propagandists, and the lure of revolutionary transformation. Importantly, whether one identifies with or is among the class of oppressed or victimized is a matter of self-determination and self-actualization. In other words, there are no hard and fast rules. Furthermore, they and their group can also define and identify what and whom for them are their oppressors. In the end, Marx and his modern-day surrogates direct their wrath at the existing society and culture, which must be toppled if life is to have meaning and start over in the newly minted egalitarian paradise. Egalitarian paradise. Thus, those in the existing society who are successful, content, and happy are tormented and targeted, for they are either among the oppressors or oppressor groups, and therefore support and sustain the status quo. Moreover, those who sanction the existing society or refuse to support or acquiesce to the agenda and demands of the oppressed are also subject to damaging and destructive pressures and conduct. Either you are part of the righteous revolution for liberation and transformation, or you are not. Hence, the allegedly oppressed become the real oppressors and wield substantial power throughout society and the culture despite their limited appeal and smaller numbers. And they become more belligerent, demanding, and even violent as their appetite for control and revolution grows and must be constantly satiated. I have no idea. Satiated. This also explains, but only in part, the cowardice of corporates, professional athletes, broadcasters, artists, actors, writers, and journalists who, in the face of such tumult, buckle under the pressure, seek to avoid the mob's notice through various forms of appeasement and capitulation, and in some cases participate in their own transfiguration and even disembowelment. For others, their boardrooms, management, and workforce are sympathetic and down for the revolution, populated from the ranks of ideological indoctrinated college and university students, particularly among the Ivy School elite, teachers' unions, or the increasingly radicalized Democratic Party, of which they are members, sympathizers, or supporters, and of course, many corporatists have simply abandoned capitalism for statism and government/economic centralization, and support groups like BLM and various radical causes as a way to curry favor, if not partner with political and bureaucratic autocrats to destroy their competition and improve their financial positions. Ted McAllister, professor of public policy at Pepperdine University, makes a persuasive case that today's ruling class, or elites, disdain our country. In a 2021 essay titled, "Thus Always Too Bad Elites," he writes, "Today we have a very different elite than America did as recently as the 1980s in terms of their nature, goals, ambitions, style, and ways of exercising power. The deepest fact of our time is that America has a bad elite, a mendacious one whose skills, values, goals, tastes, and types of knowledge are hostile to our nation's inherited cultures and plural people. The new elite that has emerged in the last generation or two has no interest in preserving anything but perhaps their own power. They lack historical knowledge and vision, which they supplement by or exchange for the powers of transformation and change. Intoxicated by the power possible with emerging technologies, inspired by visions that only a deracinated globist perspective could make attractive. This elite thinks of creative destruction as applied to culture. As winners in what they imagine to be a meritocratic struggle, they can see nothing of an inherited world worth preserving for their very success. The peculiar characteristics of their evolving power have given to our new elite the soul of adolescent art applied to a global canvas. They lack any experiential or historical ballast to weigh them down, to slow them in remaking everything according to their desires. For them, streamlining power is key to creation, and the annoying obstacles to their new creations are not really checks to prevent tyranny, but rather limitations, unnecessary friction in the headlong rush to transform. For this new elite, for instance, the good of free speech has become invisible because for them, free speech is simply friction, resistance to their goals. The elimination of hate speech is the goal, the unimpeachable good that the openness of free speech prevents. In half a generation, the work of centuries is undone and the levers of tyranny put in place. Actually, this is the best that can be said of the contemporary elite. Unfortunately, too many among us take false comfort in the belief that there could never be a Marxist-based or oriented revolution in America. And what they are witnessing is just another in a cycle of liberal movements which contribute to the evolution of American society and culture and therefore are worthy of approval and passive support. Collectively, these are America's useful idiots on whom Marxists rely. That is, individuals and organizations that are unserious and unaroused by the ominous clouds of tyranny, and even worse, are participants in their own demise and that of the country. For many, Marxism has a way of sneaking up on them. They are not yet personally threatened, and at least for now, are unmolested or personally unaffected by it, or there are those who are too busy in their everyday lives to realize what is transpiring, or may dismiss these threats as amorphous, distant, or passing events. And there are still more who cannot believe their country would succumb to Marxist influences and despotism. The purpose of this book is to awaken the millions of patriotic Americans who love their country, freedom, and family to the reality of Marxism rapidly spreading influence throughout our nation. What is occurring in our country is not a temporary fad or passing event. American Marxism exists. It is here and now, and indeed it is pervasive, and its multitude of hybrid but often interlocking movements are actively working to destroy our society and culture and overthrow the country as we know it. Many of the individuals and groups who collectively make up this movement are unknown to most Americans or operate in ways in which most Americans are unaware. Thus, this book is written to introduce you to a representative sample of them, some perhaps more familiar than others, and to provide you with specific examples of their writings, ideas, and activities, so you can know of them and hear from them. Of course, I provide commentary and analysis throughout. I also provide some thoughts about tactical actions that might be taken to help stem the nation's slide and reverse course. Although this is the longest book I have written, there is much more to be said about this subject. Therefore, I anticipate writing a second volume. American Marxism has made great progress toward instituting its goals over the last several years. If it is to be defeated, as it must, albeit a daunting and complex mission, its existence must first be acknowledged and labeled for what it is. The urgency of the moment must be realized, and the emergence of a unified patriotic front of previously docile, divergent, and / or disputatious societal, cultural, and political factions and forces, which have in common their belief that America is worth defending, must immediately galvanize around the rally to the cause. We must rise to the challenge, as did our founding fathers when they confronted the most powerful force on earth, the British Empire, and defeated it. Admittedly, in numerous ways, today's threat is more Byzantine as it now inhabits most of our institutions and menaces from within, making engagement difficult and complicated. Nonetheless, I fervently believe America as we know it will be forever lost if we do not prevail. I closed my book, Liberty and Tyranny, which was published a short 12 years ago, with President Ronald Reagan's fateful and prescient observation, which compels our attention, especially now, for it is more imperative than ever. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free. Patriots of America, unite. Okay, so that's chapter 1. That's the second part of chapter 1. Okay, so just so you know, whenever I bought that book, I had no idea what the book was about. I just bought it because it had the Russian symbol on it. So, just so you know. Okay, thank you for watching.